Good morning. Welcome to Monday. You got a list going today.
Yeah, we have a large list today. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
So we'll start with the prosecuting attorney financials, and then I'll turn it over to Ryan in case you have any questions for Ryan.
Okay.
On the prosecuting attorney, their first presentation is their general fund for their office. And this is, they're a general fund, therefore they don't have revenues sufficient to cover all of their expenses. They're supported by the general fund revenues that come from elsewhere, property taxes, sales tax, et cetera. So they have brought in just a little bit over 68. Something's not right, or my numbers are not jiving. Looks like intergovernmental, they have 31,000 they've brought in so far this year, and we don't have a budget for that. I may have to go back and look at this sheet, give you a revised one because something's not working. My totals are not equaling the actuals, and my budget says 167, but I only have miscellaneous printed on there. So, but when I looked at this or reviewed this, I don't see any issues with their revenues for this year. So far, I think they're gonna sufficiently make budget. On their expenditure side, their largest expenditure is personnel, a little over $3 million. Actuals through April 14th is $665,000. And as far as trend lines, they're a little bit below our target for the 3 months. And then on supplies, they have budgeted $54,000 and they've already spent $26,000. Still on target there. On their services, they have a budget of $396,000 and they've spent $257,000, but that's because most of that is our internal services, which are all billed in the first quarter. And so that's why it's showing they're over target on services, but it's due to the timing of our internal services payments. So like I said, most of that is internal services. 209,000 of the 257 is internal services. Next slide. Oh, and as far as personnel, we have a budget of filled positions of 26, and then they have open positions. They have about 3 open positions currently. Pretty much on track with last year. At this time, they had open positions, almost 3. They have a couple of part-time.
Yeah. What are the open positions, Ryan?
As of right now, I just had somebody start last week, so. On the support side, I'm fully staffed with FTEs. I have a part-time position that's been available since last year. Last year, we had the same individual working part-time for actually quite a few years. I don't recall specifically, but over a decade. She moved into a full-time position doing our discovery. So getting everything from Spillman, body cams into the system and the appropriate cases. So the part-time position that she was working, we have not filled. We've had 2 new attorneys start in the last month or less. One last week, one about a month ago, which leaves us technically with 1 full-time attorney position available. At this point, we're not necessarily proactively trying to fill it. We do have an individual who was a full-time attorney for us for a couple of years, left to Multnomah County, quit there after 2 weeks. It wasn't his cup of tea. And I was like, hey, you want to work 3 days a week here? He's like, yes. So we have him working 3 days a week. And then my former chief, Tom Leducer, who retired end of 2023. He's handling kind of some special appeal issues, kind of on a contractual basis. So I don't think at this point we're eager, or needs probably not the right word, but not eagerly trying to fill that last FTE position, because we do have some part-time individuals that, I guess in the grand scheme of things, cost significantly less than our full-time FTE and are covering things that we need covered. So.
Thank you.
Was hiding some rows on that one slide.
I would also make the comment that we're probably more fully staffed now than we have been since COVID. So been pretty constant. We've had multiple openings, and it's been pretty difficult for
Yeah,
4
yeah.
4 years or so.
Caseloads, how we doing there?
Superior Court felony caseloads for last year were down a bit. Part of that's kind of the fallout from essentially the legalization of drugs to bumping it down to a misdemeanor. District court, so our gross misdemeanor last year was up. Not horribly, but maybe 100 to 200 additional cases, which can also kind of be somewhat tied to the VUXA possessions.
Right.
Although a lot of those VUXA possessions are municipality cases, City of Longview, the municipalities. So the sheriff's office, state patrol does give us some of those, but not near the numbers that your city
Right.
police agencies do. Juvenile caseload has been down since COVID, but it was up last year from the year before, but it's probably still a little below what we were pre-COVID. Some of that can be tied to school policies and/or a couple of years ago, the legislature passed laws that law enforcement cannot question juvenile suspects related to a
Right.
crime without them first calling the attorney hotline, at which point the advice is don't talk. So the investigation of some juvenile crimes has been hampered by that. So
Yeah. Any backlogs or things moving through on a timely manner?
on the what matter?
Any backlogs or cases moving through on a timely manner?
I think for purposes of, I'd like to keep COVID in the past, but I think there was a lot of backlog created from COVID, court closures, virtual court,
Right.
Stuff like that. I think compared to perhaps a lot of counties throughout the state, we were able to, I'm not saying we had a decent amount of backlog, but I don't think we dealt with near the backlog of some other counties. So I say for purposes of where we're at right now, we're pretty good.
Okay,
Back charges, which are cases that are referred to our office for review and potential charging. We don't have a bunch of those sitting around. They're all either charged or sent back for further information or declined. Each individual DPA might have a hand, some to review, but not like what we were a year,
Yeah.
2 years ago.
okay.
So I think for purposes of things getting through our office, we're doing pretty good, really good right now.
Okay, thank you.
Ryan, do you have any idea as far as that legislation on the caseload goes? Where are we at with that?
Do not have a new update. I will be in Seattle tomorrow for our spring board meeting and elected meeting. But I spoke with our director on Friday afternoon after our legislative meeting, and I don't think he has any update. So I have not heard anything other than there was a new change of Chief Justice from Gonzalez to I'm blanking right now, Stevens, which my understanding is she generally is more of a collaborative type person as opposed to Gonzalez, which may perhaps be more of just do it and let it be dealt with. So I don't have an update at this point, but that's probably for purposes of, I guess, the criminal justice system, and perhaps financially, you guys, probably I'd say it ultimately could be the biggest thing that you guys deal with in this term, if it comes to fruition, because it's going to triple costs of public defense. At least. Well, on paper, they won't be able to fill the positions, so
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, our next financial is child support services. This is also a general fund, but they project on their revenues for the year about $600,000 for intergovernmental contracts, projects. And so we're a little bit, we've brought in 75,000 so far. Just that's a little bit under where we would target for at this point in time, but those fluctuates because from month to month, because they are grants.
So support enforcement, I have 2 attorneys, 2 staff. 10 years ago, I had 4 staff, 2 attorneys. And so basically, support enforcement is that our attorneys handle are tied to family law cases that kind of have a state interest. So there's state benefits, federal benefits involved with the parents. So we're talking about like parentage, custody, stuff like that. So generally, the state covers or reimburses for, I think it's 106% of our costs. So it should be well, for county purposes, financially positive thing. But like I said, we've had over the last decade, for example, had a front desk position that became available. We didn't fill it. We had a third position. We had somebody retire last year, didn't fill it. So 2 attorneys, 2 staff. And one thing we did do last year is we used to have a separate office over on Commerce, kind of across from the Merck up on the 3rd floor. When I took office, that was in a 10-year lease. That lease expired last year. We did not renew that lease, and we brought the 4 remaining 2 attorneys, 2 staff into our office with a little bit of remodeling. So we no longer pay about a $4,000 a month lease for that office. And my entire office is now within the 1st floor of the Hall of Justice. So that's kind of where we're at, support enforcement. Budget wise, it sounds like the state is obviously looking at budgets. I have not heard anything positive or negative as it pertains to support enforcement. I probably will in the next day or 2 with the state director. I will say, generally speaking, our office is used as an example when they're talking about offices that are bloated compared to their caseloads, like, not refilling positions, getting rid of costs such as leases. So I'm in Casey's good graces, and I hope to remain so. But I would foresee on state level, there'll be reductions, cost cuttings probably this year, next year. I think I'm probably on the good list, but we'll see.
Okay, and like Ryan said, on their expenses, most of their expenses are personnel related. That out of their budget, it's 513,000 is budgeted. They've expended so far about $99,000. They're a little bit under the target for the 12-month period. And I currently show they have 4 positions filled and 1 open.
We have no intent on filling that position. So
The next area that we'll go over is their prosecuting attorney victim witness program. Now, this account is not a general fund. It has its own special purpose revenue fund. And this one, they bring in, they have intergovernmental contracts, goods and services, a little bit of fines and penalties, and then they do receive some support from the general fund under other financing sources. So far, they brought in for all of those categories, 115,000 out of a $478,000 budget. I'm not seeing anything here We anticipate we probably will look at doing a budget amendment in their revenues, but I like to wait for budget amendments on revenues till after the third quarter, so we have a really good history. And because they've already brought in 40,000 out of a $77,000 budget for that category in intergovernmental.
What is a victim witness?
So our crime victim services department, so they're not victim advocates. They provide victim services to victims of crimes that we deal with. So we have 4 individuals that work in our victim services. We have one, I don't know if supervisor is the right word, senior, who's a paralegal, and then 3 legal specialists. And basically they are day-to-day talking to victims, getting information from victims, setting interviews with victims, getting crime impact statements from victims, letting them know what services are available out there, bringing them to court, getting restitution figures for financial victims, stuff of that nature. So basically they're finding victims, finding witnesses, coordinating trials. I saw 2 of them walking over to court this morning on the docket to meet up with victims. There's probably either some sentencings and or pleas that are going through, and they'll be there with the victim. So kind of they deal everything victim related. I would say on a statewide level, something just to kind of keep an eye on. Basically, over the last decade, our legislature and or courts have gotten rid of any legal financial obligations being imposed on a defendant once they're found guilty or plead guilty. So last year, perhaps the legislature the year before, basically the last remaining legal financial obligation that our courts imposed was the crime victim fund, which was generally $500 for any felony or gross misdemeanor, $250 for a misdemeanor. Our legislature got rid of that, said, hey, don't worry about it. We will fund, crime victim programs, county by county. I think they put in $4 million for the entire state, broke it up according to size. I'm kind of speaking a little bit without knowledge now, but it sounds like the intent was during this current legislative session, they're like, oh, we'll do, 4 million plus another 4 million, so 8 million over the next 2 years. I don't know where that stands, but last year the legislature assured everyone, despite the fact that we're getting rid of the $500 crime victim fund that funds your victim services, we will adequately, provide money in lieu of the LFOs to support the programs. I don't necessarily know if that promise is being kept a year or 2 years after they did that. So something to keep an eye on. I don't know where it currently stands well enough to speak on it, but I don't know if you guys can imagine our legislature having empty promises, but it might be one of those.
How are these fees? I see the goods and the services. How are they generated? Where does it, who pays it?
Who pays?
Who pays the $163,000 that you have budgeted for? Where does that come from?
Generally, those are grants, federal and or state grant monies. I don't
Okay, so
recall
it's
specifically.
not the witness or the victim that pays it because they eliminated.
Well, the witness or the victim never pay anything. It's the defendants.
Okay,
So yeah, those are generally, there's 2 grants that we get, and I don't remember the specific amount, but that's probably the most of that right there
okay.
from the state.
That's what threw me off was I'm like, if it's a victim, why are they paying?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, got it.
The legal financial obligations imposed upon the defendant who's found guilty or plead guilty.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go to the next one. And then as far as expenses for this fund, personnel is our largest expense. They are budgeted like $278,000. We've already expended $65,000. All the personnel that support this particular program are actually shown in our personnel for general fund. because they're allocated to this fund based upon a combo code. And so, but they're shown in Ryan's other personnel numbers. And then the services for this account are entirely made up of internal service billings. And so we've budgeted 51,000, sorry, not million. And we've expended 41,000. And then the last area that is in the prosecuting attorney's office is a county drug fund. And this one, very small amounts of revenues are budgeted, 17,500. We brought in 1,508 so far. So it shows that we're a little bit below target, but this fluctuates based upon cases. And there really isn't, when you get to the expenses, we've budgeted $1,500 for expenses on this fund, and we don't have any expenses so far this year. So not significant activity.
So the Cowlitz Drug Fund was created, Brad, do you remember what year? Long time ago. By basically county resolution. And so for drug crimes, there was a legal financial obligation imposed upon the defendants for the prosecutor's drug fund. Myself, doing a lot of our Blake vacate cases, so I get a motion from a defendant to vacate their VUXA conviction from either from 3 years ago or 30 years ago. The amount of the drug fund that was imposed on a defendant could have been $100, $50, $200, $500. It's fluctuated throughout the years. Basically, any revenue from payments on those legal financial obligations have gone into this Cowlitz Drug Fund, which currently sits at, is it 240,000?
Mhm. Yep.
$240,000. It hasn't really been used for much in the last 10 years. There was a chunk of money that was used for the Cowlitz-Wahkiakum Drug Task Force about 5 years ago. The task force no longer exists, but the intent of the fund is to help with drug investigations and or prosecutions. So I've kind of left it untouched. I'm sure Brad would love some money. So I've kind of treated it as a rainy day fund of sorts, but generally the money has to be expended for drug related investigations, prosecutions. So perhaps to fund a deputy for a time period if need be, a drug deputy. Again, this is also something that the amount's there because I haven't spent money, but anything coming in is drying up because A, a lot of drug cases are being vacated. B, we don't have a drug task force anymore on a countywide level. They have their CRT team, but there's not the joint multi-agency drug task force that existed for quite a few years. So I wouldn't expect this money to grow on any type of significant level because a lot of where it comes from is required to be vacated now due to Blake. So.
Okay.
Yeah, so for example, last year, all we brought in was $5,744. So it is a fund where the revenues are declining and there is a fund balance.
Yeah, it must be very limited as to what you can charge, what type of things you can charge on anymore.
Yeah, well, yeah, we don't have any fines or
Yeah.
really only restitutions imposed on defendants now.
That's
due
about
to
all you
the
got.
Current landscape of our wonderful state of Washington.
And that's all I have on the financial side in case there's anything else you have.
And how much was in, that sits in that?
The fund balance that's sitting in that particular, it's actually budgeted at right now, ending fund balance is $256,000.
Okay.
I think I've spent in 10 years a total of about 15,000 out of that for one project.
Just from listening to you in past years, I know you just kind of look at it as a rainy day type thing, what to use it for. Yeah.
I'd like to protect it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we'll move to the sheriff's department. I think it's on next on the agenda.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Any last second questions?
No.
Hmm.
Good to see you. It's been a while.
You too.
Thank you.
Yes.
When you said a drug deputy, is talking about a prosecutor, spending money on a prosecutor.
Oh,
but
I got you.
so just-
I got
just
you.
to be clear on-
Clarification.
Just going off.
Mhm. Okay, so I'll get started. So the sheriff's fund is a general fund. It's one of our largest general fund expenditures for the general fund. So they do bring in a little over, we're budgeting a little over 2,176,000 basically in revenues coming in for this fund. So far, we've brought in $166,451. The largest item here is a budget related to intergovernmental services. And this is one of the largest ones that they have is called High Crime Project. And it's revenue that's brought in, and it's brought in quarterly. And so far this year, we haven't received our quarterly payment for the first quarter because they bill and then they receive the funds in the next month or two. So they should be receiving those funds before the end of this month. That's what's typical. Last year, we brought in a little over $1.8 million, but that's because there was one quarter that was booked in 24 that really should have been booked in 23, accrued. So we still expect for this year a little over $1.4 million in that revenue source. Their next highest revenue area is their goods and services. And those are, here's an example. There's a warehouser contract that's in that line item. And so they saw an increase in their warehouser contract that began midway through 2024.
Does that include Pacific
Yes, Pacific Core as well
Core contract.
is also in there. So I don't anticipate, we actually, on miscellaneous, a bit of good news. They received some donations. They have 19,000 that came in. This was an unanticipated revenue, but so we're actually over on that budget line. We've exceeded our budget of 15,000. And they also received funding from the general fund that with some transfers in. That's what other financing sources is. And I think a little bit from the mental health reimbursement, mental health tax or behavioral health tax reimbursement there. And those are billed out monthly. So in all, it looks like most of their targets, as far as where we're at, they're a little bit below in some. But that's because some of the revenues are billed back and or done quarterly. So, but I'm not anticipating anything being a problem on their revenue for this year.
Brad, are those warehouser contracts, deputies patrolling the permit areas for warehouser?
Yes.
That's what they are? Okay.
And there's some other areas that don't fall under the permit, but primarily it is permit areas.
We'll go to their expenses. On their expenditure side, their largest expenditure is for personnel. They're budgeted a little bit over, close to 9 million, $8.9 million in personnel and benefits. And so far this year, they've expended 1.9 million. So they're a little bit below their target of where they would be on a 12-month period. And then their next highest expenditure budget is their services, and that's a little over $3 million. One of their, in their services line is where they're also have some expenses, for example, for the animal control, things like that. So their internal services are billed there. So as you can see, it's got 735,000 so far this year that's been expensed. So all of the internal services for them are also paid in January. Other than that, I don't see anything unusual to report on their expenses.
Good morning, Kathy. This is Katrina.
Hey, Katrina.
Hi, I just wanted to point out also that Northwest Security for court security is paid through there, and that's a big chunk of that professional services we pay.
Right. I think that's over, it's a contract that exceeds about 400,000, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And as far as personnel goes, for the sheriff's office, they have 56 positions currently filled, and I show only one vacancy. And we pretty much last year had one vacancy, but last year we didn't have the animal control fully budgeted in this until about this time or a little later. And so our 56 number includes all of our animal control personnel.
Is that a deputy or
Yes, we're down one deputy.
one deputy?
Yeah, and we do have two retirements coming up here in July, so we're working, I think, the undersheriff spoke with you.
Oh, yeah, I think we were trying to get ahead of the curve a little bit, yeah, yeah. Seems to have had pretty decent luck using that website he was talking about.
The public safety?
Yeah,
Yep. Yep,
yeah.
we just had last week, I believe 12 applicants in for interviews, so,
Yeah,
All from that one website?
yeah.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah, it's a regional website that the candidate goes and takes one test, and then he decides which agencies he wants to send their application to. So we get names, but we're usually competing with other agencies too. So that's why we like to move fast and
Yeah.
we can.
yeah. The new security, we've had them in there about
Since-
a little over a quarter now.
Yeah, so they started January 1.
Are you happy with what they're doing?
Yes, yeah, very happy,
Okay,
very
good.
responsive and professional. And I'm not just saying that because he's here, but
No,
they're
yeah,
doing a good job.
good.
Okay, we'll move on to sheriff extradition. And this one's fairly simple. They're a general fund, so they're supported by the general fund. They don't really have any revenues that come in. But they do have some budgeted expenses, not significant amount. We have $43,000 budgeted as an expense. And so far this year, we've expended $8,300. Of course, this fluctuates based upon, cases. And so this is our budget. Last year, we only had 8,000 in total for the year on personnel. But so far this year, we've already expended 5,000. So it fluctuates from year to year. We'll move on to the sheriff's office also has their CRT, which was previously their joint drug task force, but now it's called CRT. And they have their own fund on this one. And they have a small amount of revenue budgeted for the year. About $29,000 is budgeted in total for revenue, with a small supplement support from the general fund of $10,000. So far this year, they've brought in $11,850. So most of this is from fines, penalties, and miscellaneous revenue that they earn on the interest. So
What's the acronym stand for?
The CRT, Crime Reduction Team,
And then the CAWNF.
that's the former Kalitch Wahkiakum Narcotics Task
Oh,
Force. So the county was a fiduciary for that. So some of the budgets still have that name attached to it.
yeah, so if they receive any funds from an older case or whatever that comes in, it would still go to this fund. And then as far as expenses that go with this crime reduction team, we've budgeted for supplies and services a little over $36,000, almost $37,000. We've only expended $4,765, and most of that is related to internal services billings for this activity. So, but well under budget at this point in time versus our target. And then the next fund that we have is administered by the Sheriff's Office, is our benefits administration for those personnel that were in the, I don't know if you say it leaf or left
The
one,
left one.
left one employees. And we're maintaining this fund with some transfers in from the general fund. Every year we transfer in $300,000. They maintain a significant fund balance because they do have the long-term responsibility for health benefits and care for long-term care for those employees. So we have a fund balance of a little over $1 million. We transfer in 300,000. We're budgeting that they'll earn some interest income on those funds until expended. And so on the revenue side, I don't anticipate any issues with our revenues there.
And are these the employees that have 100% of their medical costs covered? That's what
Yes.
that is?
Yeah, this is an old retirement system that ran from about 1970 to 1977. So people that were enrolled during that time hired, you did 20 years, you get lifetime medical. So we currently have, I believe, we're at about 13 former employees that are on that.
It's about
program.
13 people.
We have 12.
Well, okay.
We have 12, and for an example, we have just one that we're paying for full-time care, and he is $110,000 a year just for the one employee. So if we ever had 12 at one time, that ending fund balance would be eaten up pretty fast.
The one thing they do, they're all Medicare eligible, so they do a supplement and any out of pocket. So it's actually a reduction. They're not paying the full
Yeah.
cost. So
And so on the expenditure side, what we were saying is that we're currently budgeting an expense of $645,000 for the benefits related to those employees, those retirees. We've expended so far this year $60,636. It's still below our target, but as Katrina said, there's quite a bit of unknown and uncertainty in this particular fund.
How-
So,
How do we decide, Kathy? Is there a formula or actuarial table? We take into account their age and all that, or how do we just pick a number?
I have no idea if there's, to my knowledge, we're not using an actuarial table to calculate this. I know that we have, like we said, we have so many of these employees currently where we're paying the supplemental program for their medical expenses. And then we also have the one that's on care, long-term
Long-term.
care.
I do know that when I worked in the budget office, there was an actuary study done, and it was to put a lot more than $300,000 a year in for these retirees, but that never happened. And I don't think there's been one done since then. That was back in 2014.
Okay.
And is the sheriff's department the only department that has those types of employees?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, this
With-
is,
With the county, the cities do, and also fire departments that were eligible, so. And there's a joint county board, Longview's accepted from that, but I know Warren had sat on that. I know one of you gentlemen have been designated yet, but there's a board that oversees this budget. Kelso was involved in that, and I believe, I think Kalama, maybe Fire District 2 have some folks that are on the same program as well.
Yeah, we have 10 in Kelso on that disability board. We have one at Cowlitz 2 Fire and Rescue, one at Woodland, and then R12 that board oversees. But mostly, there's not much to do. It's all handled.
Yeah.
yeah, and last year, our expenses in total, prior year actuals for the personnel are the largest, it was about $169,000 last year. But yeah, we budgeted 420. This year, we went ahead, we increased the budget to 645,000. Anticipating we would dip into that fund balance a little bit,
Mhm.
so.
So as people graduate off the program, and there's a balance and this is just go back to the general fund?
Yes, currently when we do our financials, because the general fund supplements this and supports this, all the funds in this account are considered general fund reserves. And so they're counted in when we talk about our reserves. But as Katrina said, the unknown is, you could eat up those this $1 million quick if you had, everyone on long-term care, so.
Okay.
The next area is the K-9 program. This program, we don't have a tremendous amount of revenues or expenses to report, but it is its own separate fund, and it receives a little bit of supplement from our general fund of $15,000 that we transfer in. And we budget $11,000 for miscellaneous, and that's encompasses things like donations, gifts, et cetera, which have happened in the past. So shows that we're below our target, but this fluctuates based upon receipts of gifts and donations. And then as far as expenses for the program, it's mostly supplies related to, services for the K-9. So we budgeted $38,000 for service supplies, and we've expended so far about $3,000, a little over $3,000. So we're below a target if you're based upon 12 months. And last year's actuals came in a little over $22,000. So that can fluctuate based upon the animal.
How many do we have right now?
We have two.
Two?
A drug dog and a tracking dog. And this past year, I think the expenses were up. We did get a new dog. So we believe that would be reflective of that.
Yeah, we got the
particular dog.
and those were the two dogs who,
Yeah.
yeah. The one still was looking at our awful.
Yeah.
Yep. If you want me to bring him back, we can do that.
Yeah.
And then the next fund is the Bearcat, the Sheriff Bearcat. This is their vehicle that is under contract, the interlocal contract with other agencies. But we maintain the funds for this Bearcat in a separate fund. So we have goods and services budgeted at $18,756. Those are the billings to the other entities that share in the services to maintain this vehicle. Then we also bring in $25,000 from general fund to help support this. So a total revenue budget of a little over 40,000 for this program. And then for expenses, we budget about the same. We haven't had any expenses so far this year. And prior year, we had about $30,000 of expenses in total for the year. So budgeting about 51,000 right now for this account for expenses.
This is a bond. We have to buy this
Oh.
Bearcat. So it's our bond payments and our interest payments, and the
Right.
other police agencies help make that payment.
Yep, those are coming up. June is the, if I'm correct, Katrina, June
Yes.
1st and December 1st are the
Correct.
the payments,
And then,
When do we use that?
Well, it's used on a regular basis, probably a couple times a month for training, and then depending on call outs. And that varies depending on circumstances. We actually have two of the Bearcats. One was purchased in 2012 on a Homeland Security grant. And they wanted to add a second one, requested one because they had an old bank armored car was the second vehicle they were using, which they like to try to surround a building, at least get on two sides, and that had a tendency to get stuck. And they had questions on its armored capabilities. So we went in together, got the bond, and all the cities are putting into that. And actually, the county cost went down a little bit because we had been previously with just the one. The county was actually building a replacement fund for the one. We said, well, if you want to get a second one, great, but let's share the expense, and they agreed to do that. And we dropped, I think, about $3,000 a year that we actually were paying just for the one to actually get jointly go in with everyone to get a second one. And these have a lifespan of 25 years. That's what they spec out. So we got one in 2012, and this one was purchased in 2022. So they're durable, and they're not used real heavily, and the maintenance expenses on them are fairly light as well.
weren't we able to gift the old one we used to?
The old armored car?
Yeah.
Yes, we found a home for that over in Lincoln County,
Yeah,
out of, I believe that's Ritzville or Davenport, I guess.
somewhere in
Yeah,
that
yep.
area I was trying to recall.
Yep, they came and got it, so.
Yeah, good.
And then the last fund we'll talk about on the sheriff's financials is the sheriff range. And this is set up specifically for interlocal contracts with other agencies and for training. And so goods and services has a budget of $19,700. We haven't brought anything in yet this year. And then a little bit in miscellaneous, and then we also support this a little bit from 15,000 from general fund. So, last year's actuals, we brought in a little over total for the year, 25,000, almost $24,000.
How many agencies you got contracted out there now?
I believe we have 11.
11?
Yeah, I think it is 11, and 20% of what we get, we have to deposit in the lead abatement fund, which doesn't show on here, but we do put 20% in.
How often do we have to clean that out of lead?
Well, currently, my understanding, even the public range has been there for a number of years. They haven't even done that one yet. They have the berm. They come in and test it every so often. And I guess it reached a point where it's, I guess, break even point where it'd be, I guess, not profitable, but worthwhile to go in and remove the lead, and they can recycle that. So it hasn't reached that point on either range yet. So. And the hope is when they do it, that there is a recycle value there that will help offset that cost.
Yeah.
And there's very little in expenses that go with this as well. We've got budgeted 7,000 in supplies. We've only had $227 so far this year. And services, 25,500, and we've only expensed $449. So That's it for the sheriff's financials. And then if there's anything Brad wants to add.
Year ago, maybe a little more than that, we were contracting out the mental health officers. And then we decided to take those in-house at reduced costs. And I'm just curious how, I think that's going, I haven't heard it's not going well, but I think it's going well. And are the numbers increased beyond what we were when we were contracting it out?
In terms of which numbers increased?
Are they making contact? Are you having more contacts with having them in-house versus when you were contracting out?
Well, I think it's really been about the same. They were working in-house. It just was
Yeah.
the method of payment. Instead of the contracting to Columbia Wellness, we brought them in as employees, as county employees. So actually their work experience has really been the same. They're out there 5 days a week.
Okay,
Things remain steady, and they're a valuable asset and resource for us.
Commissioner Dahl, I think what you're referring to is when we billed Columbia Wellness, they had a 20% charge that they would give us a direct charge above what their wages were, and we're not paying that now that they're in-house employees.
perfect. Okay. I recall it was supposed to save us some money.
Yeah, 20% markup is quite a high amount for
Yeah.
overhead charge.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Thanks, Sheriff.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next one we have is a fairly large one, and so I apologize. This is on finance that we're gonna go over, our monthly finance report. And so one of the things that's not in the report is economic and revenue update from the state. That just came out last week, and I just thought I'd give you a couple of things. On the Washington front, they're reporting that the job growth has been weak. Although historical revisions have resulted in higher level of employment, but Washington personal growth, income growth trailed the nation in the fourth quarter. They're showing Washington car sales remained on an upward trend. I don't know if that's going to continue considering tariffs, but that was good news. The only other thing that piqued my interest was that they are reporting lower collections from their major general fund. They reported for the month of March through April 10th, collecting 3.8% lower than forecasted. And it's my belief that this is probably a trend that we're seeing because of the uncertainties in the markets and in the employment. They also on their.
This is the state of Washington.
This is state of Washington, and so that has a trickle-down effect to us that I anticipate. Their Revenue Act collections, which are 3.3% lower than their forecast also. So, and then they're all other revenues that they're tracking was 7.3% lower than forecasted. So they're seeing just their most recent data that they're getting in from collections like sales tax and things at the state level, less than what they forecasted.
Yeah. Well, you keep driving business out of the state. What do you expect?
Yeah. So anyway, those are things I'm going to keep my eye on as we go. So we'll see. So we'll start off with, there's the first slide that we show every month. It's our revenue versus expense through the end of March, if you want to. So this one looks kind of bleak, general fund, but it's typical for this time of year because not all our collections are in. So our revenues so far through March are a little almost 10 million, $9.8 million. Our expenses though are at 19.7. So we're showing a deficit, almost $10 million, but we'll be receiving in our property tax proceeds later this month. So like I said, this is through March, and April is our largest month for property tax proceeds. Same goes for the county road. They also receive their property tax proceeds predominantly in April. And so their revenue is at 2.3 through March, and their expenses are at 3.6.
Now, I know what we get in property tax receipts for the general fund. It's around, because she was in 21 million.
Yeah,
What do we get in county road?
in county road, on the property tax proceeds, it's about 14 million.
About 14, okay.
For the year. But then they have other taxes that they also receive in. So,
Do you have a number that you anticipate that these deficits will be made up by when we receive our taxes?
yes, and
Is it
I'll
one
show
year?
you later what I'm projecting. I've also placed in this our projections for the year of where I think we're going to be. Using my little crystal ball. Solid waste, this is one that we're now reporting on the financial reports because we felt like this is a significant operation for the county. It's our largest enterprise fund. It too shows that we brought in 3.8 million in revenues. We have the expenses of 16 million through March for a deficit of a little over 12 million. But that's because they do their transfers to their post-closure funds earlier in the year, that they've transferred out to those post-closure funds. So that's a significant amount of this deficit right now.
And what is the amount of the transfer funds per year?
I think it's about, right now we're forecasting, I think 11, hold on, no. We're forecasting budgeted 11.5 in transfers. And last year we budgeted a little over 7 million in transfers out.
Okay, so the 11.5 has pretty
It's
much
already-
been taken out?
It's all been taken out already. Mhm.
Okay.
And then I can't remember, do we take out a percentage of the volume we take in for the year, or is it just a fixed amount that we set aside for that post-closure?
I think it's a formula. I'm sorry, Sean. Should have invited you up, Sean. It's a formula that's computed.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sean Rowley, Public Works. So the post-closure is based on a calculation of the estimated cost to close, and we have to cover that cost 100% for any prior years as the raise goes up and any new tonnage that is used during the year. And so it's both closure and post-closure. And then in addition within there is our equipment reserve and cell development reserve as well, within that 11.5 that was transferred out this year. And all those funds are for the prior year. So in March, we transferred for 2024's.
And is that formula based on previous closures on dump sites around the state, and that's how they came up with it?
Yeah, so we use our last known number for our area, and then we apply certain modifiers throughout the years to continue to stay up with that. We anticipate another closure area in 2027, so we'll have fresh numbers to restart that formula with.
And also part of their expenses are their quarterly rent payments to the general fund, which is included in this number as well.
What I'm hearing is we fully expect this to reverse itself or as the year goes on.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're forecasting the revenues for this particular fund to be $27.6 million.
Yeah, okay.
And the bulk of the expense has already been paid.
Right.
Okay.
You can stay if you want. You can join me. So the next sheet is just to give you a snapshot of some of the larger revenue items, I'm sorry, some of the larger revenue items that make up those numbers. For the general fund, of course, our largest is our tax revenues, budgeted at $32.9 million. So we've brought in so far this year a little over 2.2, which is 7% of our budget. And when you look at last year, we had budgeted 32 million and we brought in almost, at this point in time, almost this exact same amount. The one thing that I want to report on that, and we'll look at it in a little bit, but it may not be a lot of money, but it's a positive. It was our sales tax revenue, our sales tax receipts for the month of January, which we received in March, was 6% higher than the prior year. And we had seen a decline last year of a little over $1 million in total in that revenue fund. So anyway, so that's good news, and you'll see a more detailed chart on that in a minute. The next largest item in the general revenue fund that we have, well, it's not really the next, but it's next on my page, is our intergovernmental. We budgeted, so we selected some of the larger funds here to show you. It's $3.5 million. We brought in a little over $2 million, 2.1. And last year we had budgeted almost 3.5 as well. And at this time we had brought in $2.4 million. We just wanted to note that, which I previously spoke about on the Sheriff's Department, their criminal justice funding for last year that was recorded in the first quarter was really actually a 23 quarter four payment that got reported in 24. So that's why it's not comparing exactly year to year. So we're expecting our first quarter payment for that grant or that contract to come in later April. As far as goods and services, one of the larger ones in that area is our jail booking fees. And we're budgeted a little over 1.5 million there. But in total, we brought this budget down just a little bit to 2.5 this year. And last year we had it budgeted at 2.7. So in dollar wise, we are above what we were last year at this time. We have 330,000 brought in, and last year we had $282,000 brought in. So we're got a positive going there as well. On our, I'm sorry, I'm going too fast, right?
That's okay. Jail booking fees, is this a reflection on district court?
No.
So that's.
This is
something
actually
different.
our corrections area where we have our daily booking rates and fees.
All right.
That contract too, Marin Fox is working on issuing new contracts with the cities for those rates, and they're going up slightly over what they had been in the past. So
Okay.
those haven't gone into effect yet, but I anticipate they will. And so we may be amending this budget upward for 25.
Okay.
Kathy, in the intergovernmental, we didn't have it on the screen, but it says criminal justice counties. What is that?
That's the contract that, it's an intergovernmental contract that we receive revenue in for, and that's the one where they bill quarterly, and we haven't received the first quarter payment yet. It's called high criminal justice program.
And do we get that from surrounding counties or municipalities?
No, this is from, I believe it's a state fund.
Oh, is that the fund Ryan was talking about? That the state put money in?
No,
Okay.
no, this is actually for the sheriff's office.
Hmm.
It's a program that they're receiving funds from. On our miscellaneous revenue, we have budgeted a little over $10 million. And we had pretty much the same budget last year, 10.3. We brought it down just slightly for this year on our budget. We brought in a little over 2.2, and last year at this time, we had brought in 2.3. So we're down just a little bit on our interest investment income. We anticipate that to be just a little bit lower. I think we were running on average last year for both programs that are invested 5%. We're closer to 4. I can't remember what it was, 4.74. Anyway, it's a little less than 5 right now.
4 or
So-
5 or something like that.
Yeah. But I don't anticipate, while the budget last year says 2.15 at this point in time, I think we brought in more last year than what we had budgeted. So we were trying to stay pretty conservative with our budget at 2.1 on investment income. The next area of revenue at a glance is related to our road fund, and it's primarily, as you can see, the sum of their taxes are a little budgeted a little over 15.7 million. And last year was budgeted at 14.9. We're very, very close as far as revenue collections. From last year, we're at 992,000. Last year, we were at 988,000. So we're pretty consistent there. On the solid waste, which it's a new one that we're showing, our budget is 27,613,000 for the year. We brought in 3.6, and last year at this point in time, we had brought in 2,998,000. So there were some additional transactions at the transfer station compared to 2024.
Sean, is that increase due to the conversation that we had last week?
This increase is.
You're like-
I turned it off instead of turning it on. So this may be a timing issue as well. I wasn't prepared to chat on this when I came in this morning. I would, if this is through the end of March, we would see 3 months of transfer station and 1 month of landfill revenue in here if all the accruals for 2024 have been done. So for at the landfill itself, we have a 45-day billing period. So at the end of January, that first month of the year, those wouldn't have been due until March 15th. And then February wouldn't have been until April 15th. So we probably have some lag time in there as well.
Did we add any new contracts last year? When did we add Mason?
Mason was a swap. We
Was it?
excused some lower customers or less desirable customers for the Mason County.
Or the
rates.
Mason?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the last item is just motor vehicle fuel tax. It's a significant budget for the road fund, and it's budgeted at 2 million. It's brought in almost 78,000. Last year we budgeted 1.9 million. We're a little lower than we were this point in time last year. Last year we had brought in $137,000.
Is that a timing thing also?
I hadn't looked at this one.
Because that's almost half.
Yeah, I hadn't looked at it.
So we usually receive monthly distributions on those from the state at the end of the month. So there may be a timing issue there possibly as well.
Yeah.
I might point out, we get a pretty small percentage of what they actually collect that they
Mhm.
reimburse down.
We'll go to the expenses now. So for general fund, we have expenses budgeted at total $76 million. So far, like you saw on that very first slide, We have expenses already of 19.7 million through March. Most of those are in our general fund, but it's tracking as a percentage of the budget pretty consistently from year to year, 22%. For services, which is the next largest budget in the general fund, we budgeted 21 million. Last year, we had budgeted a little over 20 million. We're at 40% of budget. The expenses are up this year versus last year, and that's because both our risk management expenses went up, which is part of the services line in the internal buildings, and also our IT expense budgets were up a little bit over the prior year as well. The only other thing is transfers, and transfers is last year at this time, we delayed posting some of our transfers. It's a timing issue, and so we did some already this year for 583,000 versus 62,500 last year.
Is that increase in risk management, the increase in our full premium?
Yes. Yep. And the general fund pays approximately of those billings. It's a pretty high percentage. It's about 65% of the total billings go back to the general fund. And then we go to county road, which is another fund that we're highlighting. Our total expense budget is 50 million, a little over 50 million. We've expended so far $3.6 million, which is about 7% of the budget. I would note that when you look at our services, we have budgeted 9.3 million versus last year we had a little bit, we had about $8 million budgeted in that line. That is two things. It's increases in internal services billings, but it's also putting $1 million more in the repairs budget expenditure line for roads than we did last year.
And that's really going to our overlay program at this point.
And then on capital, I do note that this year's significant increase, about $13 million, a little over $13 million increase over last year's budget. We're budgeting 27.7 million for capital. This is due to budgeting more for construction-related projects, structures. I think one of them's a large bridge. And so I think there's several projects from 24 that got delayed and now are being moved to this year for finishing and for the expenses to flow through.
Yeah, I think we'll have an update with the board here pretty quick on our capital projects that were planned for the year originally and where those are at. As you guys have seen, the Cloverdale project did go out, thank goodness. We are still having some issues on other projects and we'll want to communicate those with you in the near future.
But these are all things we've built reserves for to anticipating capital stuff down the line.
Yeah, and Susan's team has really done a good job on getting grants and other funding sources as well. So the local dollars is quite small.
Yeah.
But so far this year, like I said, we're at 7% of budget. Last year, we were at 10% of budget. So we're tracking very closely to last year. Solid waste, when you look at their expenditures last year were a little higher. Budgeted total 34.5 million, almost 34.6 million. This year we're budgeted at 32.8. We're a little less on our services this year, but we're a little higher on our transfers related to our actual calculations for the closure and post-closure funds. So it shows that so far this year on services, we've expended a little bit more than we did last year at this point in time, as well as on the transfers. And that's why we're at 49% of budget versus last year, 34% of budget.
Yeah, as we discussed earlier, the transfers is really for those closures, post-closures, equipment and such things. On the services line, last year, we did have an amendment for about $6 million related to the gas energy project that did not happen. So if we were to compare apples to apples, we'd be looking at 16.6 versus 17.0.
Mhm. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. All three of us had a chance to spend some time with Dale Lewis over Longview. I did make our best cases why he should buy the Tenant Way landfill, but
So those are your expenses at a glance. Then we go on, we actually have a detail of our property taxes collections through March. Next. And we, our year-to-date receipts for the first quarter were 1.5. And as I understand that, that's pretty much on track with our historical. And so we will see a large increase the next time we look at this because the April 1/2 property tax payments are due and payable by April 30th. And so we still have at this point in time a little over 18.8 million to collect for 25's taxes. And then in total for the rest, you're less than $400,000 to collect for all other years. And as you can see, there are collections happening even on those every month. So. Then next one is my good news story on sales tax. This is we're showing you a 3-year, this year we'll be showing you a 3-year trend. And while we're not at the same level we were at 2023, we are higher than we were at 2024 for the month of January. So this is where I'm showing the 6% increase over 2024. And we're pretty much right on target with for our budget purposes, we should be about 8% to hit our target. And for the month of January, we're actually at 7% of budget. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
yeah.
So total budget for this is 11.5, which is about half of our property taxes, if you think about it. So, recording fee, there's good news there as well. On the recording fee, they're able to show, they have 3 months worth of activity because there isn't a lag in timing on these. But their transactions have pretty much increased over that of last year. And then the dollars as well, which is the next chart, the actual fee income is up 11% for January, pretty flat for February, down, slightly down, but flat, and in March up 19%. And these are your recording fees that are on real estate transactions.
I know there's a bill and it is expected to pass that will close, they call it a loophole. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's like when a mortgage or transfers that loan to another mortgager, somehow the document fees didn't get in. I could be wrong on that, but anyway, over statewide with that closure and that loophole, they're estimating $20 million. Now, I don't know what that means to Cowlitz County, but it appears that when that legislation comes through and passes, you might see some increase here.
Okay. The next set of documents that I wanted to go over is just kind of setting us up for looking at, we're going to be talking about 2026 budgets and 2027 budgets here fairly soon. And so I wanted to kind of go over where I think we're at. We are far enough along now. We have a preliminary financial report, budget versus actual, that we prepared. I know Kaylee is still in the comptroller's office, still working on her financials and the reporting to turn over to the state auditors, which she'll do next month in May. But we at least have a preliminary to show you. And so we had an original budget for 2024 that showed revenues a little over 54 million, expenses at 70 million, transfers in almost 4 million, and transfers out 2.8 for a budget fund balance change decline of about $14.5 million. And then this was our estimates for beginning and ending fund balance. And this is just general fund that I'm talking about. So then as we went through the year, we revised the budget. And as we ended the year, we revised that revenue budget from 54 million to 57 million. Expenses, we revised those up a little bit from 70 million to 71.6. And I will point out, when we were talking about expenses for the general fund, this is where we're budgeting as if every position is filled. And then we had transfers that went up a little bit, 4.3, transfers out that went up to 3.8, for a change in fund balance. Not much different than when we started the original budget out, but at 13.9, which is a little lower, which was good. And then the actuals, which is right now preliminary, of course, until Kaylee's completely finished. But we're saying, based upon what we have on the reports right now, almost 60 million of revenues, which is good. It's over what we estimated in our budget. Expenses at $63.8 million, which is less than what we had estimated in our budget. And our transfers at 4.3, that's transfers in, and then transfers out at 3.8 million. So we will end this year, barring any other adjustments, major adjustments, in the range of about a deficit of $3.5 million, reducing fund balance. So based upon last year's ending, we revised up the beginning fund balance to equal last year's, the 2023 ending fund balance, which was 22.7. And with a deficit, that takes our fund balance down to an estimated $19 million, $19.1 million. So that's where I think we're going to end 2024. So then having that new set of numbers helps me to forecast where do I think we're going to be for 2025. And so I looked at our revised budget through the first quarter, which says that we were going to dip into fund balance of $15.7 million. But that's with every position filled and all the overtime we have budgeted, consumed, and et cetera. And being very conservative on the revenue side. So we would still end up with a positive fund balance on that revised budget of $8 million. Now I'm going to project, use my crystal ball here and project where I think 2025 will end up being. If we have a similar revenue situation as 2024, we would end up at about 59 million. Versus the 56 that I currently have in the budget. Our expenses with the vacancies and things like that we have would come in a less, I'm forecasting maybe about 7 million less than what we currently have budgeted. And I'll show you a chart next on why I'm saying that, because I have some information to back that up. And then our transfers coming in pretty much where they're at budgeted right now. So for 2025, we would again dip into fund balance about $5 million versus $3.5 million. And that would leave us with, if we start with a 19.1 million beginning fund balance, that would leave us at the end of 2025 with a $13.9 million fund balance. And this is the assumption departments will spend, they won't spend all of their budgeted revenue because they typically don't, and I'm going to show you a chart on that. And the revenues come in at budget versus the same as last year. So those are some of my assumptions that I've built into this to show you that we probably will be at a $13.9 million fund balance at the end of 2025.
Is the emergency fund part of that 13.9 or is that?
Yes, and
it
I'll
is
show
part of
you,
that?
I'll show you a chart that kind of has a graph that says, okay, here's where your budget policy says, here's where the state anticipates would be an appropriate fund balance and where we're at. And so we still have an appropriate fund balance, but as you can see, last year we dipped in 3.5. I'm estimating this year 5 million. And so there's a downward slope on those trends. The next chart, this is very interesting. I don't think we've ever shown this before, but this is every general fund department that we have and that makes up our general fund. And their budgets, based upon their budgets, they expended about $7.8 million less than what we had in the budget for them. And most of the categories are in the direct labor line. And so in the past, departments also had to budget their overtime without regard to their direct labor line because direct labor had its own budget category. And when they needed to expend money in overtime, they had to have budget capacity in addition to that direct labor line. And so we've had some over the years budgeting that basically duplicates our direct labor, because when you have a direct labor line and you have a vacancy, you usually have overtime as the first thing that causes a variance using the fact that you have a vacancy. So there's some of that going on in our budgets that probably we need to take a hard look at this year. And I'm going to be asking departments when they are preparing budgets to look at that, because now we built the budget where the budget pool says direct labor and all other compensation lines are one budget. And they've never had that before. This was the first year that that's happened, that they had the capacity to draw from direct labor to cover overtime if they needed to for unexpected activities like vacancies. So typically, and we did this in, I think we tried to do this, we started off with who had the largest budget to show you how much of their budget was not expended. So our top three departments contributed to probably half of this underspent budget. They're 2.2 or 2.3 right there in those top three. So anyway, so this is something to consider, and that's why when I revised my 25 estimate right now, I'm saying we're only going to dip into fund balance about 5 million versus the 15 that we have budgeted. Let's go to the next slide. This is the graph that shows you, is our fund balance sufficient for our board policy and also for best practice, which the state auditor's office, they're saying you should have 2 months worth of reserves, and our board policy's 1 month. So we're showing you what our board policy numbers were for the last several years. And the green line is showing you what our fund balance actually was at the end of the financial reporting period. And I'm, of course, estimating 2025's number, and 2024 is our preliminary right now. So we've gone from 15 million in 2018 up to as high as 22 million in 23. And this last year, the preliminary estimate is that we'll be at 19 million, which is well above the state auditor's projections as well as our board policy.
Yeah. So the state, when we get it audited, they say that one of the best practice they'd like to see is 60 days. I wonder how we set 30 days instead of 60.
I don't know.
Would it be an RCW thing? I don't know why we
There isn't
wouldn't be.
actually, there isn't an actual RCW on it, but this is what the state looks at when they're doing their auditing for financial solvency and sufficiency, is they say 2 months of reserve
Yeah, I guess it's
at a
not
minimum.
a huge thing. I'm just curious in my own mind why our policy be less
So
than
much
best
less.
practice.
Right.
Is there any one specific thing, Kathy, from 2003 that you can see that's created that downward trend, or is it a combination of several?
One of the things that we're that you're seeing is that your guess you got an inverted line. You've got some expenses that are going up much faster than your revenue streams are. You have a significant limitation on your revenue streams with the property tax escalation at the 1%. With our sales tax going down, the 1 million, pretty much 1 million. But then you had collective bargaining agreements that settled. And so some of those have significant commitments to them. And so just in the range of the COLAs, you're talking about close to $2 million for collective bargaining and exempts
Yeah,
that we covered in COLAs.
with that run of inflation, or COLAs have
And then the
outpaced
inflation.
what we've been bringing in. Yeah.
Mhm. And so, I'm sounding the alarm bell that when we prepare our 26, 27 budgets, we really have to probably ask for an exercise for the departments. Not all departments are the same and have the same resources, but most departments, as you see, I was very pleased to see every single department in the general fund spent less than what they were budgeted at, to the tune of about $7.8 million. But and then that produced a $3.5 million deficit still, even though they spent 7.8 less. So my suggestion is that we ask departments to maybe, do some worksheet preparations, looking at their budgets, maybe asking them, what can you do if there was a 5% decrease, 10% decrease to your budget, asking them just to look at where they might be able to help trim their budgets if at all possible,
Yeah.
or where they could also increase their revenues.
Well, you could see this, and I've been asking, what I've been saying is you should be sharpening your pencils, because you could see it coming. I mean, it wasn't rocket science. You could see it headed that way. My question for you is, if we have a state audit and we fall below the best practice, what's it affect? Does it, for example, does it affect our risk pool rate? Would it affect bonding rate?
Yeah,
What's the negatives?
yeah, so having your fund balance declining will affect your bond ratings. It can affect your, I think just overall, your sufficiency, they would call it, your financial wherewithal. So, but the biggest one is your bond ratings.
Yeah,
That's a risk to the county.
so obviously it's something we need to pay pretty
Yeah.
good attention to.
And the
I
good news
guess.
is, right now, we're not set up, we're not looking at any significant bond issuance. But we
Yeah.
could be. I mean, we want to be in a position, the best position that we possibly can be. So, anyway, so I think my recommendation is that I'd like to, we're going to ask the departments to begin putting their budgets in. This slide here it's sort of a recap of what I just showed you, but it also includes actuals for 22, 23, and then the preliminary actuals for 24 that we believe are pretty well solidified. So there's not a lot of fluctuations there. 2022 is an unusual year because that's the year you refinanced your landfill bonds. And because of that, there was a disbursement, so it showed as a revenue. There was also then a commitment to pay down the old bonds. And that was an expense, so it overinflated revenues and expenses. I'll just tell you that by about $22 million. So, so that's the only anomaly in 22 though, but you can see in 2022, the good news is our revenues were pretty close to our expenses. 2023, our revenues were still a little bit higher than our expenses, just barely. And then 2024 is where we first see the first significant dip into our reserves.
Yeah, that's in our personnel in 2024 to 2023, that's a $4 million.
Right. In the budget for 2024, we approved a little over $1 million of new positions and for various departments. And then we also had several of the contracts settle and with the COLAs, et cetera. So, yeah, so those things cost. And we also, in 2024, increased our contribution for our employees, the part that the county kicks in for the payments, the medical payments. So
Yeah,
instead of going up $50, we went up $200 that year.
the majority was probably COLAs and medical, because
Yeah,
even, I know we increased some positions, but take, for example, the Humane Society, we stopped paying, we took employees in, but it's less than the contract we were paying.
Right.
And the same with behavioral health. We took those people in, but it was less than the contract we were
it
paying.
was less than the
paying.
services
So I
contract.
think a lot of those positions were kind of trade-offs. I think where the rubber meets the road was really trying to keep up with the inflation
Mhm.
and the COLAs for people.
So, so the last slide shows that we're going to have our call for budgets. Typically, it happens in June, later June. We have the departments first part of July start doing their budgets into our Budget Boss system. And then we close it August 11th, and we compile all that database and produce a preliminary revenue and expenditure budget to present to the commissioners according to state requirements, first of September. And then we have public workshops for departments to come present and different selected topics all during September and October. So you're going to see lots of dates there. And then we have our public hearing for the levies, general fund and road fund, late November. We'll have a workshop before that, though, to talk about them. And then we hope to have our budget complete by December 2nd. And if not, you get to recess the meeting and continue additional dates there in December if necessary. So, but I'm proposing that before they get ready to put their budgets in, that maybe the month of May would be a good time for departments to really workshop and look at their budgeted expenses to see what they might be able to do and the ramifications of those if they have to make any significant cuts. But have targets, not everybody's across the board. It's just more of targets across the board, and then the departments can compile their information and turn those in so that we can look at them.
Okay.
So is that okay if I send some worksheets out to departments and we start talking about how we might be able to tighten our budgets up to shrink that deficit if we can, even.
Anybody think that's unreasonable? I think that's probably reasonable. I'd rather them do it. If we don't get to a point and it's us three doing it, right? Wouldn't they
Right.
rather do it themselves? I think they'd rather do it themselves.
Yeah, and I think we've heard, and I think it's appropriate. Not every department's the same.
Right.
And so it should be a matter of the director being able to look at what they can do and how those impacts of what it would do to them to have, if they had to do a 10% cut, what would it do? What would be the impact?
Well, and not every department, as you say, is the same and runs off
Right.
general fund. Building planning, for example, runs off the fees
At
they
this
earn.
point,
So it's really, they're
yeah, at
really
this point, I
close.
was just thinking of just asking general fund departments to do this, not every department, not an enterprise fund.
Yeah, I would agree with that, building planning, they kind of have to be balanced on what they bring
Right,
in
they're
versus what they
self-
spend. So it's almost like you can
It's-
kind of look
they
at
are
it
an
as a
enterprise fund.
small,
Business.
business type operation, yeah.
My proposal is just for general fund, because that's where my focus is on our fund balance right now. I don't see that we have any significant issues in any of our other fund balances.
Right. Okay.
Sorry to take up so much time.
No, thank you. That was good information.
I know it's odd because when they think of county budget, we're over 200 million total, but the nuts and bolts is this 70 million.
Yes, that's
That's
your
really the
bulk
nuts
of
and
your
bolts.
primary business activity
Yeah,
as far as a
yeah.
county.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we're kind of late on the agenda stuff, but I guess we can move right to it. Is the sheriff department still on? Did they want to talk to any of their items? What items do they have? Katrina, do you want to talk to any of your items on the agenda for tomorrow?
I don't think we have anything on. I was more listening to Kathy's budget report. Do you have
Okay.
anything that shows on there, Commissioner Dahl?
I just saw them on the list. Let me look down through.
I think it was just for our budget, and then I wanted to hear Kathy's report.
Oh, the only thing coming in, and you wouldn't speak to it anyway, is call for hearing on the dangerous animals is scheduled for May. That's the one.
Okay,
I think that's all for the sheriff.
all right.
So
Thank you.
perfect. Thank you.
I'm the next item
Okay.
on the agenda list. So tomorrow we will come forward and all it is requesting a public hearing for our second quarter budget amendment. And we will be doing that budget amendment May 27th now, because there's not going to be a May 20th. Originally, I had May 20th. So that's why I was coming forward at this time. And then I have a requirement to post that public hearing for 2 weeks in the paper. And so that's why we do it the month before. So that's my only item. And in that budget amendment, we will be doing a budget amendment as well as dissolving a fund for our purchasing services, which was a separate fund when at one time we had a print shop and we had the mailroom and some other purchasing paper services all combined into one fund. We no longer have the print shop. Our mailroom is not a revenue generating shop. It's a general fund now. It's absorbed into Office of Administrative Services. And we will no longer sell bulk paper to departments. And so we don't have a need for this purchasing services fund any longer. And so we'd like to dissolve that fund. So that's also included in that budget amendment.
Okay.
My turn?
Your turn.
My turn. Number one, we have a call for hearing for proposed surplus vehicles and equipment. It'll be happening May 13th, here. So we have a few vehicles on there, a little bit from the landfill, a little bit from the sheriff's office, a little bit from ER&R, and a little bit from motor pool. Nothing too significant. We can go over that in more detail as we get farther down the line. We might have some additions to that as well.
Do these go to an auction or the public gets, you probably
Yeah.
answered this for me before. They go to, at one point in time, we tried to sell, didn't we? Years
So-
in the past,
In the past, it's been cleaner and easier to do it through a third
To-
party.
do it through third party.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually the heavier equipment we send up to Ritchie Brothers.
Okay.
And then the lighter duty passenger vehicles and such things, we send down to J Stout in Vancouver or Washougal area, just based on the premiums they charge.
How many total is it?
12 currently. Oh, I'm good. You want me to keep going or you want to jump into yours?
You can do whatever you want.
Right. I'm gonna go down to the motion item number next, the fun one. We have amendment number 1 to the professional service agreement with BHC Consultants for as-needed solid waste engineering to increase by $400,000 up to 1 million total. And this is for our cell 10 design. We have 30% designs. We're working towards 100% for construction in 2026. And so that's really where these dollars are going to. We want to be mindful of our amendments and do them purposefully. So that's going to include, the hydrologist, the geologist, the liners, the gas, everything that goes with designing that landfill.
So we're at 30% presently, and this will shoot us into 100% at the end of
We're about
2026?
a little over 30%, but this will bring us to 100% is my understanding.
Okay. What
So-
point in time do you think, oh, sorry, Steve.
No, go ahead, Rick.
What point in time do you think cell 10 will start being used? As soon as we get it designed, I mean, is it ready or we still got capacity?
We'll still have capacity in 9. I'd rather have it in the ground ready to go in case there's something large or
I agree
event
with
of
that.
some
I
sort.
agree with that, yeah.
That way it doesn't slow down any revenue flow. But
Yeah.
how do we figure the initial, like the initial $600,000? How did we come up with that number? And where the increase of 400, what's that for? And,
Mhm.
what's the process of going, okay, where did we get 600,000 and why do we now have an additional 400?
Sure, yeah. So at the beginning of the year, we look at, or at the beginning of the contract, we look at what we have or what's remaining that we need to do, such as, we have multiple task orders with them. So for our leachate, our on-call needs for, say, acceptable waste for maybe material that we are not equipped to handle. We need a little bit more guidance on those. On-call general filling needs. So as we plan how to fill the cells, that we'll get advice or technical layout on that. Installation of our stormwater controls, of our gas systems, things of that nature. And so we ask for those proposals from them. They'll give us that scope and the requirements for that. And at that point in time, we may negotiate or we'll bring it back to the board here and ask for that change.
And when we set up this original contract, some of our leachate needs were unknown at that time. It came about because of Turwa's restrictions on what we're discharging to them. So we've done some studying and sampling that would not be our normal. The fill plan was also something that we originally didn't anticipate. So there were things that we've added to this contract precipitating this extra 400,000.
So they're typically variables that just pop up. They're not miscalculations based on information that we got.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's usually an ask from us.
Yeah.
So the remaining two items that Sean so graciously jumped over were two call for bids. The first is the call for bid for the countywide guardrail project. Now, this is different than the guardrail project that went out to bid in December. This is installation of new guardrail, and it's federal safety dollars. So it is 100% funded. We're estimating about $508,000. The majority of this money is being spent on Little Kalama River Road and up on Shirley Gordon. We have several areas where there's steep drops off the side of the road. So the majority of the money is being spent there, but there are other locations we're also adding guardrail. So that one will open on May 20th. The other call for bid we have is for the annual striping project that will open on May 19th. We have a current estimate of $647,000, and we're striping all the arterials and collectors, and then the roads that are being chip sealed this year. And there are a few roads that aren't arterial and collectors that we do every year due to their elevation, the frequency of fog, the steep shoulders. We have a few locations that we recognize need to be striped annually also. And that is all general road fund money. So it comes from our road maintenance budget.
Isn't that down from last year? Weren't we
Yeah.
around 800,000 last year?
We were, yes, we had a lot of chip seal roads that weren't arterials and collectors last year.
They've replaced all the guardrails out west side, at least where I live. Well, I'll see how long they last.
See how long they last.
Yeah.
We also know we have a handful of locations that we didn't get corrected because they occurred after the start of that project. But because it's a unit bid contract, we'll come back to you probably October and November to supplement that project's budget for them to pick up things that have been hit since they're done, been done through October, November. So we'll have a good start in the winter.
That's what I was just gonna ask you. For these two projects, how far into fall do we go?
So the new guardrail, once they get started, it's probably 4 to 6 weeks. So we'll be done some point in the summer. Striping, the goal is always to be done before Labor Day due to weather.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're real close, Jessica. you want to head right in, or what do you have? One request, do you want?
Taking it easy on us today.
Good morning, Jessica Warren, Human Resources. I have a request from Public Works to fill one of their open ASE or non-ASE certified mechanic positions. This position's been open for the past year, but due to some other positions being on extended leaves, they'd like to fill this position.
What's ASE?
Good question. It's their certification automotive, do you know, Sean? A mechanic.
It
I
means
believe
they've
it
had,
starts with an automotive.
they've had to pass some kind of test, I would guess.
Yeah. And they can fill it as a certified or non-certified position. And having your certification comes with more pay. So somebody commented on what it is. I can't read it from here though.
Automotive service excellence.
Okay, I had the first word.
There we go.
Not seeing any objection. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is she on? So why don't we have Jennifer Giltrope? Oh, okay, from Yale. There you are. And I know we have a couple positions, so.
Yes, hello, I'm Jennifer Giltrap from the Port Vancouver Regional Library, and in the room there is Kathy Wheeler, who is Secretary of the Yale Valley Library District. So she's welcome to come up to the citizen table if she would like to add to what I'm saying. I was asked to give you a little overview of the Yale Valley Library District. So if you have a few minutes, I would love to do that. The Yale Valley Library District is a rural partial county library district under RCW 27.12.470. The Yale precinct is the taxing boundary for the Yale Valley Library District service area, and voters approved that district in May of 2003. It is considered a junior taxing district, which is governed by a 5-member board of trustees. The trustees are appointed by you, the Board of Commissioners of Cowlitz County, and must be residents of the district at the time of appointment. Trustee terms are for 5 years, and no trustee may serve more than 2 consecutive terms. We do have the bylaws of the board that we can share with you if you're interested. Currently, we have 4 board members and and 1 vacancy. And Kathy, who is there today, her term expires in July. So we're looking for 2 more people to fill the board. You recently appointed Nikki Jolly. She has not yet been able to attend a meeting, but she's our newest board member. The board meets 6 times a year to conduct the business of the district. And Yale Valley Library District built the current library, which opened in July 2021. And the district contracts for service with Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries. That's why I'm here. We provide all of the services within the building. So the staff, the books, the technology, everything that's happening within the building. And we attend the board meetings and keep track of the financials for that library district. And we treat them as just one more of our 15 locations that we operate throughout 4,200 square miles. We provide fiscal management, staff, materials, technology, and maintenance for the Yale Valley Community Library on behalf of the district board. The 2025 Yale Valley Library District levy rate is 29.2975 cents per $1,000 of taxable assessed value. And our revenue is projected to generate $175,000 this year. So that gives you a little bit of overview of what the Yale Valley Library District is and why you are involved in appointing board members for that district. The library board met in April and reviewed the current applicants that have been submitted. And the board would like you to consider appointing Elisa Demecchio and Imelda Ochao. I hope I'm saying their names correctly. And Kathy, if you would like to add anything, please do.
Is the green light on? There's a little button. There you go.
Gotcha. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Jennifer. It's good to see you this morning. I am Kathy Wheeler, and I have lived in the Yale Valley Library since 1972. And we moved there with 2 small children. And at that time, there were probably about 600 people that lived in the valley. And the school was the main, everybody went to the school, a 2-room school. Terrific. And there were quite a few, there were several of us, and the school, I had children in the school, others had children in the school, the teachers, the cook, the volunteers, all for years in the 80s and 90s dreamed of having a library service. And if you'll read our packet, which you probably should keep in your files, because that will educate you in who we are and what we are. Oh golly, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, the levy or the opportunity to form a library district came up two times, and the boundaries were the school district at the time, and both times. And during those 2 levies, it always passed in our precinct. This is the impetus for this project that you're now seeing. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a new law put in the state called the Partial Rural Library District, creating one. And one of the members of our small group, which turned into a support for this library, the Let's Read Committee, was Julia Stoll. And in the law, it said you have to have a contiguous boundary with another district. And if you want to join the district, well, with the school, we did have a contiguous boundary. But with our precinct, we also had a contiguous boundary, and it always passed. So we went to our commissioners, just like you, Bill Lending. I don't know if George Rader was on at that time. And there was another one that has just escaped me. I've been trying to remember his name. And they said, you get the signatures and you get the support from Fort Vancouver, and we'll work on this. And we did. They gave us the support. They actually paid for our first election, which was incredibly generous of them. If it had failed, we would have had to raise money to pay it back. But the library district accepted us, which that was the huge thing because they had the expertise that we didn't have. And in the very beginning, after we got ready to vote, and it did pass, the boundaries had to be set. And the library district said all along that we needed to go with the precinct. There were some that thought in order to get it passed, we should go with the fire department boundaries, but we didn't. We went with precinct boundaries. It passed, and that decision probably is responsible for us having a library building today, because that, I don't have a picture of our precinct, but that include Timberland. And Timberland really paid for this library. And at the very beginning, at one of our very first meetings, the first resolution we did was put any funds that came to our library in a reserve capital project to grow and to build a library. And by the late 20 teens, we had $1 million. And through fundraising, through state grants, we are what you see today, a viable library. And I don't know if any of you have been up there. And I was thinking about this over the weekend. I think COVID put a big dent in things. Things just kind of came to a stop. And we lost contact with you as commissioners, and maybe you weren't on the board then. And we lost contact with you, and you lost contact with us. And it turned out I came back on the board after being on for 9 years. And because it was just difficult for people to get up here to do an interview. And that's what the commissioners always did, was an interview. And so I talked to them on the phone, and a couple other trustees did the same thing. And then we've just had a struggle in getting trustees, and now we have an overabundance. But that, in a nutshell, is who we are and what we are. And we're, way out there, I know, and we're not in town, and we're not, on the freeway north. But in my opinion, the Yale Library is really a crown jewel in this county. There is no doubt about it. We have a fire department that's right there. We have a library building that's right here, right in the middle, and then we have a school over to the side. They're all connected. And the school uses the library constantly, as the rest of us do. And in closing, I'd just like to say our supervisor at the library, Leslie Miller, said that we're getting 1,000 patrons a month coming in. That can be the same patron, you understand. Some of us go in several times. That's a lot. And we're, as Jennifer can say, we're in the black, and we are to the point where this year we've drilled a well, because I think in the future water is going to be an issue. And we're also blacktopping our parking lot in May. So that's who we are. If you have any questions, ask me. I'll be glad to tell. It's a great story of how we came into being. And I was thinking, I hope other library districts in the state, maybe did the same thing that we did. I hope so. And because it's really worked out well for us.
Awesome.
Thank you. Anything to add, Jennifer?
No, Kathy does a
Okay.
wonderful job, and obviously a deeply committed citizen that without which many things would not have
Thank you.
happened. So we really appreciate all she's done for the community up there.
Yeah.
Just
What?
real quick, to what do you attribute the overabundance in interest now? For people wanting to be trustees?
Totally. I think it's awareness of what the library has to offer. It's if you go into Portland, it's a 50-mile drive or more. We can order from the library anything that Fort Vancouver has. And that's for people who have disabilities. We offer books by mail. They can get books by mail. If they have computer access, they can access whatever, magazines. I could go on. Jennifer, you probably got a better handle on
Yeah, I
this.
think all of that, as well as just growth of more families in the area, and discovering also a lot of homeschool community
Yes.
that are using the library as well. So whether they're checking out the physical items or accessing the hundreds of thousands of electronic items that we make available, it's just a really good, efficient way for people to access information of all kinds. And the Friends of the Library of the Yell Valley Library District, which is a separate 501c3 that raises funds for programming and other things, they've also rebirthed recently. And so that's also caused, I think, more interest in what's going on.
I do too.
And what were the two you guys recommend? What were the two members?
Elisa and Imelda.
Yes.
Okay,
Elisa
those are
and
the two I
Imelda.
had up front. Okay.
And would you like to get our, our minutes, or not our minutes, but our agendas? I don't know.
Yeah, but
I'm good with moving ahead with your recommendation.
with the recommendation, I am too. I appreciate you coming in. It's been, um, nice to hear the history of it. I'm a motorcycle guy and 2 or 3, I don't know, when we had a decent day, I just took off and went up and had lunch up in Cougar.
Sure.
So I went right by it. It's a nice little building, yeah.
Well,
Oh.
libraries are growing. Woodland has a new library and our library is fairly new.
Yeah. Perfect. So I think, I'm not seeing any objection to going with, your guys' suggestions, so we'll appoint Elisa and Imelda to those positions. And we thank you for the time you've spent there,
Thank you.
Thank you.
obviously.
If I could interrupt just for 1 minute, we'll have to know who you're appointing for the current vacancy. And then the second person wouldn't be appointed until Kathy's term expires in July.
You have a preference?
Well, Alyssa has been coming to the meetings, observing, so that would be, I think, a good option for the current vacancy. And then
Okay.
Imelda when Kathy's term is up.
Okay.
Are they willing to serve in those positions listed like for the treasurer?
There will be a new nomination for officers that happens in June, I believe.
Okay,
Okay. So we'll appoint Lisa in the current position and,
Imelda
for the July opening for Kathy. Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for spending time with us today. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's been fun. I s-
well, thank you very much for your time and your
Yeah.
service.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the room.
Yeah. What I understand is we have one more item. We had
Yeah, I'd like to call an executive session, pursuant to RCW 4230-110, for potential litigation.
potential litigation,
How much time you think?
Probably 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Is Doug joining us? Okay. We will adjourn to executive session. Okay, we're back from executive session. No decisions were rendered. Anything else, gentlemen? Okay, we will adjourn, be back tomorrow morning. Thank you.